you feel quite alone, and you feel like you have to stay strong for everybody else. But there are days where you do lose it, and it's horrible. You're kind of faced with your own mortality, which is horrendous. And I think unless you've been in that situation, it's hard to understand, and so you feel quite alone. But you come through it.
I found that the difficult part was the night before when I had to come home. That's when I had my most emotional night. I went through this, is Richard going to still love me? Am I still going to be the same? Am I still going to be a woman? Is our relationship going to change? All those sort of feelings went through my mind the night before. And I had a couple of strange dreams, so I talked about them with one of the counsellors, and she said that that was a fairly normal way to go through things. And she said it's when you're in hospital, you've got this like comfort zone and everything's okay, but then all of a sudden you've got to go home and you've got to face life again at home and get back to normality.
It's always there in the background, but it's not the major focus of, I mean, I would hate to think that my major focus of life was a cancer. Major focus is just all the other millions of things that we all do all day, every day.
Women who've been diagnosed with a gynecological cancer, regardless of how good the outlook is for their cancer, will still have fears about their cancer coming back and of death. What a lot of women will explain is that the longer time goes on and the longer they are from their diagnosis, the more of an issue those fears can become, because they feel they have so much more to lose. With certain cancers, it's more of an issue. With women with ovarian cancer, there is a high likelihood that their cancer will recur. And we talk about dealing with this as a chronic disease. So they are living with the awareness that they will die of their cancer. They don't know when they will die of their cancer, but they know that they will die before they would have expected to otherwise. What is important with this is we find ways for women to cope with living with this uncertainty. Things that we will do is actually just finding out how much of an issue it is for the woman. If it's just an issue the week before she comes for follow-up each time, that's not as significant as if she is getting thoughts running through her head all the time and she can't concentrate on anything else but this fear. Women will talk about having a box in their head where they put the cancer, and that every now and again they open that box and take it out and have a look at it and then putting it back in so that it has boundaries around it. Others will talk about whether the cancer is winning their mind. It's very difficult to have control over what the cancer does to your body and whether it does come back or not, but how you deal with that is something that you can have control over. Women will describe that if they let the cancer mess with their mind, so to speak, then the cancer's won the battle. I have looked after some young women who have been in remission for a significant period of time, but that whole remission has been overshadowed by wondering when the cancer was going to come back, so that they've not had quality time when they were cancer-free. For some women, that will need referral to a specialist, clinical psychologist, to go through strategies such as cognitive behavioural therapy or other similar things that may work for them.
The cumulative life stress now with a cancer diagnosis is what plunges them into a depression or an anxiety. So we need to think about being accurate in identifying disabling anxiety and depression where it exists and having that treated as you would in any patient, in any population. So it's important to have access to a psychiatrist who works with cancer patients to determine whether this person has a depression that needs to be treated or whether their depressed mood is something that we might expect to ameliorate with time and information and with counselling. Depression is a normal part of it. Doesn't mean to say that we throw up our hands and say, oh well, they're depressed and there's nothing we can do about that. We need to be really careful to continually monitor women for signs of a disorder that would respond to treatments, whether they be pharmacological or more commonly with a combination of psychotherapeutic interventions as well. It's important too to address the psychological consequences of having cancer and and it goes back to that sense of families saying, wow, you know, I'm so proud of the way you got through that, and this is great, and this is our new start. But to really to help women to process the distress that they've gone through and to make meaning of what's happened to them, and to think about reframing the horror of it into how has this tested my resilience, how has it helped me to be a stronger person. And I think that there's often a tendency to think about the negative impact of the cancer, and they need some help in thinking about how it's changed me as a person. The fear of recurrence is a very big problem with women immediately after their treatment and can persist for years. Fortunately, it's one of the things that responds well to psychological interventions. Counselling and in particular mindfulness strategies can be really helpful in helping women to be realistically optimistic. Of course the cancer can recur. It happened once, it can recur again. And the odds of that happening are different for every woman and different for every cancer. So what we're trying to do is to teach them techniques and strategies for living in the moment, hoping for the best, but being realistic about what might happen you know, down the track. We can't know that, and so it's important to hold yourself in the present and to make the most of, you know, the opportunities that are there for now. Loss and grief issues are associated with all major life changes. Even the happier life changes, so moving house, going to a new job, there are, you know, pluses and minuses to everything. And an intensely life-threatening experience like a cancer diagnosis, there is necessarily some loss and grief. Even for a woman who is expected to survive her cancer, there is that time of hearing the diagnosis and wondering if you'll survive. So staring down the barrel at the potential of your life being limited and not as long as you thought is a traumatising experience. What I think it's really important to encourage is to acknowledge that loss and grief. Because what we often see, particularly from family members, is that sense of, you'll be okay, you're lucky they found it early, you know, aren't we lucky we live in, you know, in Australia in the 21st century and they've got all these treatments now. Gosh, this is great, you know, you're going to be okay and you've been given a second chance at life. That sense that you need to be positive all the time and upbeat and you can't allow any negative emotion to be expressed. I think sometimes what your counsellor provides is that safe space to say, this stinks and it's horrible and I'm worried and I'm frightened. Because family members have a vested interest in making you feel better and making you feel good, and they're terrified too that the worst is going to happen. And so sometimes it's important to see individual people on their own, the patient or family members on their own, to say what it's like in a confidential space, to say what it's like to be worried about the losses that you've had. What in fact I find is that I meet the most amazing people who find resilience that they didn't know they had, and who cope with the most extraordinary stresses and difficulties in their lives. These are ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances.